Hey everyone, welcome to Bombin in the AM with Scoops and the not Wolf, because the Wolf is on the prowl in New York checking out a bunch of PS4 stuff. There is a big launch event happening. Jeff and Brad have flown out to check it out. It's kind of the last sort of controlled look that these companies can sort of exert on the media, and I think it's also where maybe some stuff is going to get picked up and brought back to the office. But so while those guys check that out, the show does not stop at Giant Bomb, and I am thankfully this morning joined by none other than Jeff Cannata, known for acting, podcasting, game playing, showing up in iPhone ads, all sorts of things that you are responsible for, Jeff.
Yes, I'm happy to be here. Thanks for brightening my morning.
It was funny that I just sort of idly mentioned on Twitter about bringing on some guests, and the people I know the most, like my largest index of contacts, are people on the West Coast. But I feel so bad asking people to wake up that early. I know some people do; they got kids or responsibilities, but like getting up and like being ready to chat about games at 7:30 is sort of the antithesis of what it is when you get in to write about games for a living. Not
right. The whole point, yes, the whole point of getting into the profession is to sleep in. I'm a kind of an early riser anyway, though, so I'm happy to do it.
So why don't we talk a little bit about, people on Giant Bomb may not be super familiar with your work, but in addition to being on Weekend Confirmed every week, you used to be on the Totally Rad Show, which went on for what? That was like 5+ years. That was a long time.
Yeah, yeah, it was almost 6 years. Yes. Yeah.
And then you kind of went on. You did a Kickstarter to kind of start your own thing, which was, from the episodes I've watched, it certainly takes some of the spirit of Totally Rad Show, but that you have, it seems like you're melding a lot of what you were doing before. It's not just games, it's also movies and comics,
right,
and comedy. How has that been going for you?
Yeah, it's great. So Newest, Latest, Best is the whole goal was to sort of pick up the torch where TRS left off and take that geek culture show, talk show, video format, and move forward. And yeah, it's about all that stuff: movies, TV shows, comic books, video games, all of it in a big pot. And I like to call it the ultimate guide to how to spend your free time. So it's fun, and you were nice enough to make an appearance on that show. And one of the fun things that I like to do with this new version of that format is to have people on and recommending stuff at the end of the show. So you had some awesome Halloween recommendations on our Halloween show. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I'm very in demand in October. And then outside of October, nobody wants to know what I have to say.
Well, you have a very, very elite set of skills, sir, and those skills are...
Yeah, I try an elite set of skills that are useful 30 days of the year. But there was a question someone asked me a couple of weeks ago in my Tumblr account that I think you more than anyone are sort of equipped to answer. Is one of the things that is facing a lot of media these days is there's just not, if you're not Vox Media in sort of the Polygon Verge empire, there's not a whole lot of money to go around. It's becoming increasingly difficult to work in media and just find the financing to sort of do what you want to do independently and not feel like you're sort of selling yourself out in the process. And one of the things that someone brought up was that, for games, for movies, for music, Kickstarter has turned into, or crowdfunding, maybe more generally, has turned into a possible venue to sort of break out of the traditional funding molds. And that's absolutely something that you did. And I'm curious why you chose to go to crowdfunding and how that has worked out, because that puts you in such a direct relationship with the people you are making content for.
Yeah, it was amazing, and it really exceeded my expectations on every level. I came to the audience and asked for a very small, starter fund to make a pilot, basically. And what happened was we got so much of a response that I'm able to make a lot more episodes than I originally intended. I really just wanted to make the show as an example that I could send out and try to have a more traditional funding model. And the fact that the audience responded in such a powerful way has allowed me to do many more episodes and have much more direct control over it and have that one-to-one relationship with the audience. And a lot of my Kickstarter rewards were like hang out with me on Skype for a while. And that process of having Skype conversations with people and interacting with them one-to-one has been incredibly rewarding. I can't even begin to tell you how fun and just life-affirming it is to talk to the audience as individuals rather than as a group. It's a double-edged sword because I feel like I'm not anxious to keep doing that. I don't want to have a Kickstarter every year, for example, to try to keep the show going. It's not something that I think can be a reliable, at least for me, a reliable model, because I just don't like begging for money. You know,
Right.
I don't want to have to keep. I don't want to be PBS. I don't want to have to keep coming to the audience and going, "Are you liking this? Can you send me money?" You know, so I'm really trying to take Newest Latest Best and use that starter money, get the show some momentum, and then try to figure out a way to make it sustainable in another way. But I could never have gotten even to this point without the support of the audience, which has been absolutely incredible. And so yeah, I mean, I think for a certain aspect of the creative process, it is incredibly powerful and is incredibly it gives you options, which is great. But we still have that problem of how do you get sustainability? Advertising model are problematic. People don't want to hear ads in their shows. There's, as you said, less and less money out there to be spread around, and a glut of content on the internet. So it's definitely a problem that we're all facing. And Kickstarter is a great tool, and I think in that arsenal to connect with your audience and get people invested, not only financially but emotionally in the content that they want to see. But I don't think it's a final solution for me, at least.
Well, that's interesting, and I think what you're seeing is, you know, even, you know, some developers like Double Fine talking about is that not looking necessarily at crowdfunding as sort of the end game, but a means to an end, which is
Right.
This solves a very specific problem that, you know, you've spent your career building an audience, and you're doing it right if you feel guilty asking for it. I feel like if you have this humility in asking for that help, then I think you've earned the right to maybe do it and see how your audience reacts. But also, it means your heart is in the right place, and you haven't, in an industry that goes cynical so fast. And I find that to be the deepest cut is when someone tells me that I'm sounding cynical. Is that tells me I need to reevaluate, you know, kind of what I've been doing lately, because I feel like, you know, one of the things that people always say about you is that you are so crazily, endlessly positive. I feel like you are the model citizen for not allowing for cynicism to sort of take over as it so easily can when we sort of like get into discussing stuff like games and media.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely look at cynicism as my enemy, but I don't. I think people can confuse that with being Pollyanna or unobjective, which I definitely am not trying to be either. I'm not trying to be universally positive in the sense that I can't see flaws in things. I think that my body of work shows that I'm definitely willing to call a spade a spade. You know, I will be critical when it's necessary, but I think that the difference, the way I define cynicism is prejudging, and I think that it's okay to make judgments. It's okay to be quote unquote negative about things in the sense that if you find flaws in things, it's okay to call them out. It's about wanting to come into the experience and liking it. The goal is to find joy in this stuff. It's a hobby after all. And I always think about it like when I see a flaw in something, when something doesn't grab me, or when I end up not liking the experience, I'm disappointed. I'm disappointed. It's not like, you know what, I knew that game was going to suck, and you know what, it sucked. That to me is cynical, you know?
Right.
I was hoping to have a great experience with this, and unfortunately the game let me down, and here's why. Or the movie or the TV show or whatever it is. And I think that's a really critical difference, because if you come into the relationship with the piece of media as hoping that it satisfies you on a whole bunch of levels, I think your head is in the right place, and I think the audience responds. That's why we do this stuff. That's why we pay money to go to the movies. That's why we buy video games. We want to be entertained, and I think reminding ourselves that it's entertainment, especially in the environment we're in the next couple of weeks and the last few months, which is these consoles coming out and everybody feeling like they need to.
It's rough out
fight.
there. It's rough out there.
It's unbelievable.
I tweeted out, even as someone that did a TED talk recently about how you should engage with discourse and not allow sort of the toxicity to
which was awesome,
rise.
By the way.
Thank you.
Fantastic job, man. I was so impressed.
I don't. I think YouTube needs to get a lot of its tools under control before I even recommend people look at YouTube. I think it has a lot of really specific problems, but I couldn't help but screenshot and tweet out this one comment that was in. So there's a bunch of new Xbox One commercials going out, and one is with the former Bear Brian Urlacher and former Raven Ray Lewis. And in the comments, this one guy, Bob Mitt, writes, "Here's a link to the official PlayStation 4 Perfect Day commercial. Go check that link out. You can decide which console is built for gamers, not NFL nerds." And like the ultimate irony in reading that statement, I feel like encapsulates how crazy a lot of this has become, and like sort of the distance that we have lost from, I think, just playing the games and getting to enjoy that. And I think we're so close to that. And at least this weekend, you had a chance to. You had a chance to go play some games, and
I did.
From all accounts, BlizzCon is sort of like the ultimate love fest when it comes to a community coming together. So, what was BlizzCon like this weekend?
It was blast, man. I love BlizzCon. As you said, it is a very positive, fun show. There's tons of cosplay. There's people, uniting from all across the country and the globe of like, we're in this guild together on WoW, and I've never met you face to face, and now finally I have, and we're like hanging out and going to dinner. It's that kind of environment and spirit and joy that's palpable as you walk around the floor. But also Blizzard brought it. They had some great announcements. It looks like they're really doing some awesome stuff to reinvigorate a couple of their brands, including WoW and Diablo. Reaper of Souls plays great, and they have some incredible ideas on how to reinvigorate that game and make questing more fun. Taking the auction house out is just sort of step one of what they're doing. This new adventure mode in Reaper of Souls is really clever and fun, and the new class that's going to be in that expansion was playable there on PS4, in fact, and it was a blast. The new expansion for WoW looks awesome and has a lot of really cool features like player housing. And then you're looking at stuff like Here's the Storm, which is their MOBA, and Blizzard. It's hard to bet against Blizzard in a space like MOBAs where it's really crowded already. It's hard to bet against Blizzard because they have put so much time and effort into making that game awesome, and they have some really clever ideas like your entire team levels at the same time rather than individual people leveling, so you can sort of get, if you keep dying over and over, you kind of get left behind.
Right.
And Hearthstone was, I think, one of the biggest surprises for me this year in the gaming space, because I adore that game. I'm a huge fan of tabletop anyway, and I love collectible card games. And Hearthstone is doing so many things right, and it was great to see at BlizzCon how much the company is putting behind that game. It's not a side project at all. This is a huge, major product that they're putting a lot of energy and time into, and I think it's going to explode when it comes out of beta. It's just fun right away, and I've been playing a ton of it in beta, and I love it. So it was a really fun weekend.
Yeah, I've heard people have endlessly positive things to say about Hearthstone, and I think, I spend so much time all day long on a computer playing games, doing my job. What I got most excited was that, I don't play a lot of card games, but this seems like this is a card game that almost anyone can enjoy, even if they don't have a whole lot of experience with sort of like that genre or not that much into tabletop. When they announced the iPad version, like that's sort of like when it went off in my head. It's like if I could be sitting around sort of catching up on a crappy TV show that I'm only watching because I feel some sort of compulsive need to keep watching it, like playing Hearthstone seems like the perfect addition to that experience, and it seems like it could be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I mean they announced iOS and Android versions at the show, so it's going to be on everything. And I think they even said they're working on a Windows OS version for tablets. Yeah, it's perfect for that. It plays fast. It's easy. You can get in and get out. It's a free-to-play game, and it has microtransactions. But it was interesting in their talk. They showed that of the top-tier players in the beta, of their what they call the 3-star master ranking, 44% of the people at that level have not paid a single penny into the economy. So it's a game you can play for free. You really can play it for free. So it's not like a lot of trading card games where it feels like your success is based on how much money you put into it.
Right. Yeah, and that's definitely sort of like at the heart of, I think, for like the core gamer dilemma when it comes to this free-to-play stuff is because it's so new. We almost don't even know how to judge what's good and what's bad. So like I'm playing, I got addicted over the weekend to the like Marvel Puzzle Quest.
Oh yeah.
Out on iPhone and iPad, and that game's free and it has microtransaction hooks. And the one that I got over sort of the cooldown stuff pretty quickly. I get that that's some of the hooks you just accept because obviously they need to make money, but the ones that I have trouble reconciling are. So when you finish a battle, you get random drops, and those random drops can be used to upgrade your team and to heal team members that have gone down in the middle of a match. But it allows you to connect to your Facebook account and get greater drops if you connect to Facebook.
Oh boy.
So you're getting drops and rare drops on the regular just fine, and those feel like they come out at a regular place that I wasn't feeling sort of alienated by the business model. But the moment they said, well, you could get an extra health pack if you connect to Facebook and post it to your wall, that's the moment that it got gross for me, and that's where I can't. Like the game could be perfectly balanced, and it's only there to make it easier or for players that want to engage in a more social structure that is pacing to their media accounts. But that was like an immediate red flag to me that made me want to just delete the game.
Yeah, because now you feel like a whore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I just can't judge. Like I just don't have enough experience, and that's why I need to start playing more of these, is to get a better sense of what actually is gross and what is just part of this new way of designing games, because it's such a new field that I can't. It's easy to feel like it's all gross and to want to not engage with any of it, but I feel like it's clearly so popular that you have to get in there and get a better sense of what is actually working and isn't working, so that we can better judge it, as opposed to just sort of across the board saying it doesn't work for me, because that's clearly not the case. Free to play is going to stay, and it's just a matter of if Blizzard can show concrete data that the top tier players are not buying things, that seems to reflect that you shouldn't. If you do want to buy stuff, go for it, but that you don't have to if you want to be competitive. And I think that if they can show that through data, that's way more compelling to me.
Yeah, I agree, and I totally see where you're coming from on the Facebook thing. I mean, it's one thing to give my money to something; it's another thing to give my voice. And I think asking people to sell their voice, which is my personal Facebook page of where I put my thoughts and feelings, whatever. I think that you're right; it does feel gross. I got really into Card Hunter a while back, and it's a fantastic game.
That's the browser one, right?
Yeah, browser-based, really cool. Brilliant combat system, elegantly designed, fun, has a funny kind of theme to it, really great. But even that game, at a certain point, I was like, just let me buy it. I just want to buy it. Can I just buy this experience and play it? I don't want to, they keep dangling extra loot. It's like, well, if you were paying your subscription fee, you'd be getting this loot in addition to the loot you already got. And then I was like, well, at a certain point, I always feel with these free-to-play games that I get to this. I start playing this meta game with the designers, where I'm seeing how much of the game I can play without giving you money. So now I'm trying to game the system by seeing how far I can go without spending any dollars. Where if your game was just $20 or $30 outright, and I was playing a demo, I'd be like, this is awesome, buy. I would do it. But the fact that it's like this constant dangling of another thing that I could be buying, now I'm starting to challenge myself to not spend any money on it. And I don't know if that's productive. I really don't. But then you see the stats on how much some of these free-to-play games make, and you can't argue with them for wanting to do it.
Yeah, I mean, I think, Plants vs. Zombies 2 is where this kind of came to a flashpoint where I think for the most part, a lot of people that are really into, core games can kind of ignore a lot of the free-to-play stuff. But it's when it starts sort of converging, and Plants vs. Zombies is like that perfect casual/core that everyone can kind of get behind game. And it sparked like a really huge, interesting discussion about, sort of the free-to-play model, and had there, no one's going to begrudge EA and PopCat for wanting to do a free-to-play version, but I think the sentiment from a lot of people was, had there just been a $15 or $20 in-app purchase that was, here's the full game, balanced out, you don't have to worry about anything else, we'll shut off all of the dangling, we'll shut off all of the ads.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people would have bought into that, but then you're right, when you actually look at the spreadsheets, they find that would turn off a valve for them that isn't worth it financially. And that's where it gets really complicated, and I think that's where people, rightfully so, just start kind of ignoring the business model. It's an uphill battle. If it's the money is there, but it is one spot where I don't necessarily blame people to be cynical, because it's almost the business model itself is sort of constructed on cynicism to begin with.
Well, yeah, I mean, at a certain point, these games are constructed as a psychology experiment rather than a game. It's like, we know exactly the human buttons to push that make you want to push the button to buy.
Right.
There is a cynicism in that design, and you can never. It's hard to know where the designer's headspace was at in certain respects, because sometimes you feel like, oh man, they just wanted to create this sort of system, and it happened to work with that particular business model, and then other times it feels like, wow, they worked backwards from the business model,
Right.
and it's unfortunate.
So, are you a guy that is still playing WoW? Are you one of those people that, the new expansion comes out and it's like, okay, well, I'm signing back up, I'm going back in?
Yeah, I mean, I played Mists and got to the end game and played the last patch and just canceled my account because I was like, I have new consoles are coming, I can't. But yeah, I'm definitely a level 95 guy, and so yeah, I'm in.
At least you're smart enough to cancel your account. I remember a story of Garnett Lee telling me, or maybe it was on a podcast. This is years and years ago. I think a lot of people have sort of fallen off, or maybe come back for a month when these new expansions come out. But he was one of many people that, when they thought about it, realized that WoW had just become like a Netflix account, which is maybe something you don't use as often as you can justify that monthly purchase,
right.
But it just sort of is something that's on your statement every month, and you just never quite get around to canceling it.
Yeah, no, I'm not I'm not into that. I mean, I've definitely had a WoW account longer than I should have at certain points, but they make it so easy to sign back up. I feel like I can just cancel it if I'm not playing for a couple of months. And but yeah, the new expansion looks awesome, and I will definitely be playing that when it comes out. Who knows when that will be, but yeah.
So, do you go back for the game, or do you go back for the social experience? Because I feel like increasingly when I talk to people that are still playing that, they're obviously interested in the new content, but that there is a whole lot more to the reason they're coming back than it is sort of like the gameplay loop, or enjoying upgrading their character, as is the case with a lot of other games.
Yeah, I think it's a little of both. For me, it tends to be the case where when I go back to the game, it's like, hey, let's all go back to the game. With those core guys that I play WoW with. But we're definitely all going back because we want to experience the new stuff. It's like, oh yeah, the game is, and especially with MMOs, there's a definite benefit to leaving it for a while and coming back to it. And with a game like WoW that's been around for 9 years now, and I played it at launch, when you haven't played it for 6 months or 8 months or a year, and you come back, it's like, oh yeah, it's this comfortable shoe that I remember, and I really enjoy it, and you feel like you're returning to a place that you have nostalgia for. And
it's kind of comfort food, like gaming comfort food. It's like, what it is. It changes, but it doesn't change that much. It changes just enough to keep it interesting, but not enough that it's not the thing that you wanted when you signed up for it.
Yeah, Absolutely. And I think it's the same experience people have like loading up Super Mario Brothers 2 on Virtual Console or something. It's like, yeah, oh yeah, my God, I remember having fun. And then with an MMO, it's like I remember all that fun, plus there's these new things to explore and new quests to do and all that stuff.
Interesting. I feel like I'm in this weird thing where I've never really played WoW, despite the fact that I feel like I should have to at least like say, one way or the other whether I liked it or not. But then it got so deep. It's like the equivalent of like a show being 7 seasons in, and it's like it's too much. Like I can't.
The big features of the new expansion is you can start a new character at 90.
See, that just sounds terrifying. Like then don't I have to figure out a skill tree for up to 90, or can I just hit like recommended, this is what I want my character to be?
Well, there's plenty of websites that'll show you exactly where to put your skill points, and the new way the skill trees work in WoW makes it much simpler and less scary. The game has become, to the chagrin of a lot of the hardcore WoW people, it has become much more accessible to new players in recent years. They have done a whole bunch of things to make it really easy to pick up. So if you're interested, it's certainly no better time than with this new expansion.
All right, put a little dollar account up in the corner of your screen.
Yeah.
Sold me on a month. One thing before we move on from BlizzCon, I definitely want to ask you about is we got some of the first real details about the Duncan Jones film that is coming out in 2015. I don't know if you were at the panel or not, but
yeah,
either way. Like, what is your set? Like, are you psyched for Duncan Jones? Like, you think this is going to be sort of a slam dunk, because this is such a different thing for his work. But I also feel like if you've seen Moon and Source Code, is absolutely in his wheelhouse, and he seems like he's set up to hit it out of the park.
Well, the coolest thing about that panel was to hear how much of a fanboy Duncan Jones is. Like, he played Warcraft Orcs versus Humans. I mean, he's been there since the beginning. And loves Warcraft, has 290 characters. He's in, and there really wasn't a lot of info at the panel. It was basically a bunch of guys sitting around going, "Hey guys, the movie's real. It's really happening. We love the game, and we're going to make sure the movie's good." That's about as much information, and they didn't really have much to share. They showed some concept art, which looked cool. And they talked about sort of the basis of the storyline, which will be kind of a origin story of how the Orcs versus Humans conflict began, which is a cool thing, but I think kind of predictable as far as the film goes. But yeah, it was basically just, we want to assure you, the biggest Blizzard fans on the planet, that we are taking this seriously. There's a big budget, and we all want this to be good and also honoring the source material. And I think that it seemed to me that Duncan Jones in particular is uniquely suited for that job. And I really liked both of his previous movies, and I think he's ready to step up and do something on that scale. And he referenced Peter Jackson, he referenced Game of Thrones. He has he hit all the right notes.
I mean, he seems like he's following the pattern of a lot of other sort of smaller, smart independent filmmakers that are making like really nerdy smart films where they kind of get plucked up. Like the guy Garth Edwards who's doing the new Godzilla is in a similar situation where it's like they do something really smart and small, prove that they can do really interesting things with like zero budget at all, and then just get immediately brought up to the major leagues.
My old co-host Dan Trachtenberg is the same story. He did the Portal film, and now he's doing
Why the Last Man, right? Yeah, yeah, that's a great comic series. Like I don't read a whole lot of comics, but I read that one start to finish. It seems like a real natural for a film or series.
Yeah.
But yeah, Duncan seems like the arc of the movies he's worked on. Moon was Source Code managed to show that he can make a more mainstream film without it sort of losing sort of its intelligence. Obviously it's not as sort of in love with itself as Moon was, but it's also it had a different aim. It was aiming to be a more mainstream studioized sort of film, but didn't feel like it lost what Duncan Jones sort of brings to those sorts of films. So that's why I think he is uniquely set up for World of Warcraft. And the only question now is I have to wonder, they must be seriously rethinking that release date, because
definitely.
There's no way it's coming out on the same day as Star Wars. Like there's no way. But I will, it's so against how this stuff normally gets handled. I loved that Duncan was on Twitter immediately just taking pot shots, like in a really fun way, but just saying like, "Bring it on, JJ! Bring it on, Jedi's!" Like, because he must know like immediately that his movie's probably getting moved to, you know, the next summer or something like that. But
yeah, there's no way. But that's it's funny and charming and yeah, it's great. One of the other things that they mentioned at the panel that I think is a really interesting take is that they want to create a situation where the human, it's going to be orcs versus humans primarily. They want to create a situation where both storylines are given equal weight, and it's not the humans are the good guys and the orcs are the bad guys. It's that you're getting sort of a civil war, gray versus blue, where you're seeing what motivates each side, and you can sort of pick your allegiance, which is cool. I think that's an interesting way to freshen up the fantasy genre, because you've never seen it from the perspective of the quote unquote monsters, which is interesting.
Yeah, I really liked that he said that. Yeah, that's the first thing he came in with the script and said, "Hey, it can't be, you could do that." But then at that point, it just becomes about the spectacle, and
right.
We've got enough of those movies. I'm sure he would do a great job of conveying the spectacle, but that seems like the easy route out. Whereas if you can make, the two sides compelling and interesting, and if you can feel bad for these ugly orcs, then that seems like maybe you've got a chance at, making a movie that transcends just being a fun fantasy film.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I'm curious to see where that goes. Duncan Jones, following me on Twitter, was the first time in a long time where I've had a complete meltdown about how to handle myself on the internet. It's like I don't know how to do this. I'm sure this is Gary Whitta's fault, and then also the irony in that Gary Whitta worked on a World of Warcraft script at some point. My world is collapsing upon itself.
I'm just nerdy enough that I had that experience when Renner Knizia folled me.
Oh, wow.
Even heard, you know who that is?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. He followed me, and I was like, Renner Knizia's following me. Oh, my God.
Well, that just becomes this moment of like, I guess I can't talk about David Bowie on Twitter anymore.
Yeah.
So how are you feeling? We're in the, video game next gen is upon us. How are you feeling going to this stuff? Are you getting both consoles? Are you psyched? Okay, so you're gonna cover all your bases. You're not gonna wait till the spring. But are you? I know
I would recommend other people to do that.
Yeah, I've been telling most people, if you're gonna get one, get a PS4. I think that that lines up with my sort of like I played plenty of AAA games, but I certainly fall in these days in the more personalized, independent crowd. Like I like games with very specific voices, and Sony is doing a good job of lining a lot of that stuff up. Ultimately, if you want the best of everything, go get a PC. But that's certainly not an option. Financially for some people, there's a lot of upkeep in the PC stuff. Though, as I've learned getting into PC in the last 6 months or so, not as much as people I think make you think there is. Especially if you've got a friend that can help you out through those initial stages. But so I know there was the Amazon deal over the weekend for some people that had pre-ordered games.
Yeah.
Like, what are you actually buying for? Because it's one thing, of course, you're going to buy the machine, but then you got to get games for it. So where are you falling on that?
Well, the game I'm most excited about, honestly, is Resogun. I think that game looks like the most fun I'll be having. It's kind of like when the 360 launched, and the game I was playing the most was Geometry Wars.
Yep.
But I definitely took advantage of the Amazon deal. I picked up Assassin's Creed 4, Killzone, and Knack.
Knack, huh?
Knack. I was not. I'm not 100% sold on Knack, but I'm gonna give it a shot, and I hope it's awesome.
I want it to be great. We had a conversation about this on the show last week, where if I went back and played Cameo on Xbox 360, it's probably not very good. But I had a lot of fun with that game.
So did I.
At launch.
Me too.
I really enjoyed Cameo. I thought it was charming. It was pretty. It kind of got the job done of helping me feel okay about that initial launch slate, especially when you played Perfect Dark Zero and it was terrible.
Right.
So it's not like I expect Knack to be like Super Mario 64, but I saw some of the co-op footage, and I like it when I can find games to play with my wife, especially to justify a $500 purchase. And if Knack could fill that role of having a reason to sit down with my wife and play through a game, that would be worth the $60. So I'm just hoping for a solid game. It looks kind of boring right now, but I'm hoping that maybe just the videos aren't selling it in the way that it might.
Well, what I played at E3 of it, I'm sure you played at E3 as well, did not wow me. But yeah, I'm hoping that it has a good pedigree, and I'm hoping that it's a lot of fun. And as you said, I really like Cameo. I've always hoped for a sequel to Cameo. It doesn't sound like it's going to happen, but yeah, I enjoyed it, and I hope if it is as good an experience as that was, I'll be completely happy. So yeah, it's interesting though that you referenced Super Mario 64 because Nintendo got their games out early and to me, and
Oh, you have Zelda?
I have Zelda.
Oh, you bastard!
and I have
Super Mario 3D World. Ah,
yeah.
you're a monster! I'm turning off the show. Oh my
I'm-
God!
I apologize that I'm actually not allowed to talk about them in detail yet, but
Can you tease? Can you tease?
I will
either?
tell you this: if any of the new console games are even remotely as fun as those two games, I will be shocked. I will be shocked because I think that, ironically, all the hullabaloo is about these other two companies, and there's this third company that's putting out incredible games this holiday season on the same day that the Xbox One comes out. 2 games.
Yeah,
And-
that November 22nd is nasty. It's the Xbox One launch. It's Zelda. It's Mario, and then the game that I know no one's going to play, but I'm going to go to bat for it, and I hope it's as good as I'm hoping it is. But Tearaway also comes out on that day,
yeah.
and Tearaway was my favorite game out of E3, and this comes from somebody that not hated, that's a strong word, but strongly disliked the platforming physics of Little Big Planet to the point that it ruined my enjoyment of that game, despite it thinking it was incredibly charming and so fresh. And like, I really love Media Molecule's approach, but as a guy that's a big platforming guy, I couldn't reconcile the floatiness. And Tearaway it looks just in the same way that Mario 3D World does, just so charming and so cute, and just it makes you smile the entire time that you're playing it.
Yeah. It's frightening to me to think that they might be sending that game away to die on that date. It's got some stiff competition, that's for sure. But hopefully it finds its audience. I'm definitely excited to play it too. I really loved it at E3 as well, and I'm rooting for it.
All right, well let's go over some of the. So we covered BlizzCon. Let's see if we can go over some of the news. There's not a whole lot, so people in the chat want to start dropping some questions for Jeff and I. Once we walk through some of this, we'll answer some of those before we bring the show to a close. But I wondered if you, in between attending BlizzCon, saw some of the madness of early consoles getting out to various people.
Yeah, it's crazy.
There was
I didn't watch any of the videos of unboxings or anything. I feel like I want that experience for myself. But,
yeah, we're this close. Like
come on.
some of the leaks don't. It's not that exciting because you kind of want that excitement for yourself when that box shows up. Are you getting it from Amazon? I assume you're probably getting everything from Amazon. Yeah, that's what I'm doing too. But I thought it was this. What was interesting about the Xbox One stuff was it's this classic PR blunder in which probably security and network protocols ran into exactly what PR doesn't want to happen, which was a guy got a console early from Target, not his fault. Target screwed up, sent it out early, and this guy is really excited for it. He's psyched for the new Xbox. Like, he's doing God's work in terms of viral marketing. Like, you cannot pay for this stuff to get it come across this authentic, and they ended up banning his account. Which, when you start to think about the logic of how that happens, it's like they're working on a day one patch. They're still working on back end stuff. They're trying to control some of the message. So when someone just sees an Xbox One go live in some random part of the country, that IP isn't flagged, that gamer tag isn't flagged, it makes sense that someone just goes beep and turns that off. Even though if everyone got in a room together and talked about it, they probably would have concluded, let the guy go. He's selling consoles for us. Major Nelson isn't selling any consoles to anyone when he says, I love Xbox One. But this random guy with 40 Twitter followers is probably getting people psyched up about their purchase. So I thought it was nice that at least they, Microsoft reached out, said he's not permabanned. It's just a temporary thing until we get to launch, and they're going to fly him out to the Xbox One launch event, whichever one is near him, and that seems about as good as a story as those can kind of end. For something that I imagine for a corporation is just a complete nightmare about how you deal with.
Yeah, it reminds me of like some comedy movie where the guy is dealing with a little kid and he's like, "You little joy, little I love you." It's like, I'm gonna hug you. You're so good,
Because they're looking at that embargo sheet and they're just like they're ripping their hair out as this guy is like running through the dashboard. He's putting up like file sizes for like the different download games, and it's just and it's actually one of the things I have to commend Sony for is that they're also a corporation too, and they're a Japanese corporation that has its own eccentricities and its own weirdness, and they come across as a company that is very nimble, even though that is probably not true. It is probably more calculated, but it's always about appearances. If you can appear to be nimble, then it seems like you are, even if you aren't. And Microsoft just seems, you watch these situations play out, you can just see the corporate grinds, just like you can see the gears just going as this stuff kind of comes together, and it's too bad. They just don't seem to be set up in a way that they can embrace this stuff in a way that Sony somehow seems able to.
Which is ironic because last generation it seemed like Sony had that problem with, they're trying to roll out media stuff, and it's like, you are a media company, you should be able to do this, and they were having all these problems like one hand not knowing what the other hand is doing, trying to set up a online movie store, and it's like, you make movies, you're a company that makes movies, you should be able to do this, and they were the ones last generation who it seemed like couldn't were too big and bulky and cumbersome to get out of their own way, and now they seem like the nimble ones, and Microsoft feels like the big behemoth.
Yeah, I mean it's a cycle, right? Company does well, you become arrogant, you become less nimble, and then sort of the cycle continues. And I think the real question going into this generation is just how much money is there for everyone to go around? Is the Wii U an anomaly? Is the Wii U completely, is it not doing well only because Nintendo bungled some very key things like messaging and having quality software in the first year? Problems that hit other platforms too. But I think it's going to be really key to see what happens once the launch is, everything's going to sell out. That's just the nature of the amount of money pumped into this, the amount of hype that's going into it. The real, telltale sign is what happens in the spring and next Christmas. If things are slow and not chugging along, maybe the Wii U wasn't an anomaly, and maybe, the amount of money that Google and Apple have siphoned off from these consoles, is a lot more than people realize. That $600 that people spend, every 5-6 years on a new console, that money is actually going into, an iPad Mini, which, that's sort of its own thing that's launching in the middle of all of this, is a brand new iPad, even if, it's obviously going to be supply constrained. Obviously that's going to sell out too.
Right. Yeah, and it's something we talk about a lot, and we can confirm it. And it's certainly, you can make a case that if there's kids want to play games, they can play them on a tablet, and a parent can justify a tablet purchase in a lot of other ways than they can a console, in the sense that, well, they can take it with them, they can do their homework on it. It's a much more varied use case device than a console is. So yeah, I think it's definitely clear that that those are in, if not direct competition, they're in tangential competition, and I think that's a big deal.
Yeah, and actually, Orange Tory in the chat brings up a question that kind of leaps off from this that I'm curious what you think. He says, despite all the excitement, what if PS4 and Xbox One sales are lackluster like the Wii U? What do you think happens next?
Wow. That would be really scary for the industry, I think. I think there's a lot of companies making strong bets on those consoles, and you see, I don't remember there ever being a console launch like this one where what, 90%, 95% of the games that you can buy on the new consoles, you can also buy on the old consoles. And that is purely from that's a numbers game. These third parties that want to hit their numbers for these big franchises like Battlefield and Assassin's Creed and Call of Duty, they need install base. And if you don't have that, and you aren't going to ever get that, that's a really terrifying prospect for the industry, and it's the kind of thing that leads to a real, I think, different kinds of games being made and a real reevaluation of the industry. I don't think it's going to happen, but it would be pretty scary stuff.
Yeah, I don't think there's a question that there is less money to go around. I think it's more of a question of what are the long-term impacts, and how does that change the dynamics of how games are made as a result of that. And you see them trying to position themselves in ways to get money in other places. It's why Microsoft's made all sorts of really colossal errors in rolling this out and selling this to its sort of core audience. But I also haven't blamed them for really doubling down and going deep into all sort of these ancillary stuff. I watch a lot of football. I know you do too, and you can't watch a Sunday night football game without seeing Xbox One ads, and haven't seen a single PS4 one. And it's part of that's because they have a partnership with the NFL and they're integrating all that stuff. And if that stuff works, like, I'm going to use that. Like, it's unfortunate this year that I don't use NFL.com for fantasy football. I use Yahoo and ESPN like the most of the world. But if I could have my leagues updating in real time while I'm switching, between like the Red Zone channel, like that sounds fucking amazing. Like, I would be really into something like that. And I think that's where Microsoft has made these bets and done just a really poor job of communicating the other stuff it's doing. You've got your Titanfalls and things like that, and it's sort of it said, no, we need to do this in order to stay alive. And Sony's sort of making the opposite bet, which is like, well, we're going to have these media stuff in here, but we really want to make sure that the people that have gotten us to this point, they're very happy. And how that stuff plays out, I think we're going to not see right away, but is going to be super interesting in that first year for sure.
Yeah, and I think the thing that maybe perhaps people aren't thinking about when they get caught up in this console war stuff is that neither of these companies are going anywhere. This is a long-term play. These consoles aren't in any danger of becoming the Dreamcast. No console is going to stop being manufactured. These are consoles that are going to live for years to come, and they are going to evolve over those years. These products are made in a different way than consoles used to be made. They're made as boxes that can be upgraded and changed and given new features and features removed, and it's all going to morph over the course of 5, 6, 7 years. And the landscape as we see it now is going to be very different from the end of this console cycle, just as the last console cycle is very different from the beginning to the end. And I think to get caught up in who wins Christmas 2013 or which console looks like it has more power now or whatever, I think those are tiny battles or tiny little blips of information that over the course of the lifespan of these consoles is going to make very little difference.
One of the questions a couple people have asked is, you like me, you're buying both consoles because you want to be there day one, you want to kind of be a part of everything, and it's also just to kind of keep up. But if you remove that, if you weren't buying either at launch and you were, being a little more conservative, waiting till there was sort of a must-buy game, like for either of those machines, are those is there a game out there that would have converted you like in the spring or summer if you were waiting a little bit longer?
I mean, I think the easy answer to that is Titanfall. Titanfall certainly looks like the big new experience that looks extremely fun. That and Infamous Second Son, I think, are the two games I'm most excited about for either console. I think that the biggest recommendation I can have for people that want to make the right purchase decision this Christmas is to wait. Because a lot of this stuff is going to, over the next 6 to 8 months, a lot of this stuff is going to settle down. You're going to see announcements for new games, and there's going to be much more information upon which to make an informed buying decision. And definitely can recommend a Wii U wholeheartedly right now, or a 3DS. Those are the two, I think, most exciting games coming out this holiday season. If you want to play something that will definitely be fun for you and your friends and will deliver awesome experiences, those are it. And you can certainly play all the biggest games. I mean, other than, I think Dead Rising 3 certainly is very intriguing to me. I have that pre-ordered as well. So I'm anxious to play that game. I think in recent previews it has looked much better than it did at E3, and I'm really excited to get my hands on it. But for the most part, I think waiting on especially if you're only going to buy one console, waiting is not a bad choice. It's easy to get caught up in that, got to have it right now. I certainly am guilty of that. But I think the easiest recommendation I can make is wait and see.
All right. Well, the last question I'll plug from our users is one very specific for you. Is Bane122 asks, could we get the backstory on the corrections officer Jeff played on The Young and the Restless?
Oh, well, it would take hours to talk through his backstory. I mean, he started out as a child. No, it's.
But one thing that people may not realize is that, in addition to being a face for games and doing your own show, like you are, your day job is a lot of acting. And I guess if we're to connect that to games, like, do you end up talking about games at all on the sets of these things, where a lot of the stuff you do is sort of, the audiences for a lot of those shows is certainly not, the audiences for people that are watching this.
That's true. I definitely have had conversations about games on sets before. Games are much more mainstream than they've ever been, and people know about them and are talking about them. I always feel like I'm a little undercover when I go and work in Hollywood, because rarely do people place me in the context of that when I'm there. So it's one of those things I'm sure you've experienced before too, when you're in mixed company. Maybe you're at a family gathering, or you're hanging out with people that you only kind of know, and somebody will say something that is wildly misinformed about video games, and you feel like, do I come in with the knowledge bomb right now, or how do I handle this? That tends to happen a lot, where it's like, wow, this is you'll be in like a Best Buy or something, and you'll overhear two people talking, and they're just so wrong about something. That often happens to me on sets, where it's like, do I now out myself as having a really deep knowledge base about this topic?
Yeah, do you want to be that guy? Is it worth it to be that guy?
Yeah.
And I think, I've talked about this on the show before. I also think exposing yourself to stuff like that is also super interesting and healthy, because it gives you it gets you out of sort of the bubble. Yeah. And which is so easy to get caught up in, because we're all enthusiasts, and it's a lot of fun to talk to people that we can immediately look at and be on the same level and not have to explain a lot,
Right.
Sort of the base level knowledge. But it is also interesting to talk to the people that actually who buy these things, are creating enough money for this stuff to exist. That's not us. We're the enthusiasts. Right. We get buzz going, but we don't justify corporations engaging in these activities. And hearing what sticks and what doesn't stick, and what people are talking about, what people aren't talking about, like the talking points that actually make it through to a larger audience, that's what I'm always curious about. Is like, that's why I love talking to those folks at Best Buy, is just getting a sense of like, okay, you're a guy, what have you heard? Like, what is stuck with you? Like, you're not checking Giant Bomb or Twitter every day for this stuff. Like, what are you carrying to Best Buy when you're thinking about what you're buying? And I always find that stuff to be really enlightening, because the stuff that you maybe think doesn't stick does, and the stuff that we all get wrapped up in has zero bearing on what those people are talking about.
It's so true. It's so true, and it's so informative to be a fly on the wall in those situations, and you realize, that all the crap that that NeoGAF thread is just so out of this person's view of the world completely. It has no bearing on the. So yeah.
So all right, well, why don't you plug? What do you got going on? This is your chance to let people know what they got up to point them elsewhere. So what else do you got going on that you want to let people know about?
Well, Weekend Confirmed, of course, is a weekly video game audio podcast. We put out every Friday morning. It's on shacknews.com. Myself, Garnett Lee, and a variety of guests every week. Also, my show, Newest, Latest, Best, is a video show about video games and a lot of other geeky fun stuff. You can find that on YouTube at the moment, which is how it's being distributed now. Hopefully that will change. But my YouTube channel is youtube.com/CannataJeff. That's with 2 N's and 1 T. And yeah, follow me on Twitter at Jeff Cannata.
Awesome. Well, Jeff, this has been super fun. I'm glad that start this pattern of waking up my West Coast brethren early in the morning. Really appreciate you coming on the show, and people should follow you on Twitter and follow other stuff if you're interested. And hopefully this has been interesting enough that you'll come back on sometime. Oh,
it'd be my pleasure. I had a blast. I'm a fan of you and the site, and it was a lot of fun. Thanks for inviting me.
Awesome. Thanks, Jeff.